Hi, my name is Dave, and welcome to the Light Forest Podcast, a journey of exploration to bring more light into how we live and regenerate our planet. In this conversation, we are joined by Dr. Ora-orn Poocharoen, currently the founding director of the School of Public Policy at Chiang Mai University in Thailand. In this conversation, we learn how Ora is bringing spirituality into policymaking through the lens of authenticity. She shares how she's working hands-on with the Thai military and climate change department to literally help them be more grounded and connected with nature as they create policy. Some of the stories you'll hear today will change the way you think about the Thai government and the potential for policymaking to make the kind of deep-rooted change we need. Ora is a successful and high-achieving academic and public policy professional. She is a former United Nations Committee of Experts for Public Administration and previously an assistant professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at National University, Singapore for about a decade. Ora authentically shares the moment when she realized that she'd been ignoring her emotions and the wisdom of her body to the cost of her relationships, and how eventually they led her to see that the systems and institutions she was operating in were also lacking that authenticity. Today, she is pioneering a new brand of public policy, authentic public policy, a refreshing and grounded view to policymaking that will hopefully spread to governments, militaries, and universities elsewhere. Ora is working closely in the area of climate and environment, leading a government task force on PM 2.5 air pollution in Chiang Mai. She is an influential member of the Asia-Pacific Futures Network and part of the Spirituality, Science and Public Policy Network at Jindal University in India. Ora is a person that weaves together many disciplines and spaces, bringing together sacred with science, spirituality with policymaking. She is both a pioneer creating new spaces and hospicing our existing institutions to help everyone find more authenticity in their lives. Before we go into the conversation, a couple of housekeeping notes. We had the conversation at the School of Public Policy at Chiang Mai University, or rather, we sat right outside the building and recorded it. Hence, you will hear some background sounds, some hopefully more sounds of nature like birds and the hum of the forest, but you'll also hear occasionally some cars driving by and some general urban sounds. By and large, I've tried to enhance the dialogue so that you can hear us clearly and crisply, but I've also tried to keep in some of the ambient sound so it's not lost. I hope that you like the general mix and the audio. I love to record conversations sitting outside, especially under a nice tree. So I would love your feedback in terms of what you thought about the audio and whether it worked for you. I'm also excited that this is going to be the first video of the podcast on the YouTube channel. Previously, I published short snippets on Instagram. That will continue, but now I'm going to publish this conversation in full also on YouTube. So if you prefer that, I invite you to check out the YouTube channel. And finally, I hope you're locked in either on the podcast platforms or on Substack. Substack is where you will stay in touch with all the Light Forest updates, not just the podcast, but also writing, which I do with increasing frequency. So with that, thank you so much for joining. I hope wherever you are, whether you're sitting down, walking, driving, or doing some household chores, I hope that you enjoy this conversation on authenticity and public policy. So I'm super delighted and honored to have you on to the Light Forest podcast.
Thank you, Dev. Your introduction was very generous. Thank you so much.
So we have a lot to talk about,
Okay.
but before we go anywhere in this forest, can we just take a moment to admire the spot that we're sitting in?
Yeah.
It's amazing. The trees, they feel very light forest right here.
True. It is like a forest, but it's light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been working here for several years. And what's it like to be in this environment and work?
Yeah, I can't ask for more.
Yeah.
I mean, many people come here and then they always say, such a beautiful office space, beautiful part of the campus. And I mean, I take no credit because it's all the trees that have created this wonderful space. And the building itself is rather old, but we renovated it and we kept all the trees and and just try to, be part of it and not command it or control it. And actually, the two large trees that sit and we have our building in the middle is like a gateway because the space between two large trees, if you concentrate and you go stand or walk into that space, then sometimes you can feel the energy that flows between the large trees that connect.
Yeah.
So this is like that. Our school public policy is in the middle of two large trees. And that's why our opening date was 2, the number 2, signifying, the two large trees and always having like a partner or having some collaborators to work with. So the opening date for this building was the 2nd of February of 2022.
Nice.
So that's when this building opened.
So much intention. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky then to be sitting in this gateway, I mean, metaphorically and literally as we enter this conversation. So there's a lot of things that I know we'll end up speaking on, but it feels like the most suitable starting point might be to invite you to share your vision of authentic public policy with authenticity. What does that mean to you and how do you see that?
So that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, actually, because in the field of public policy, there's always some adjective that we strive for. And it's always been, actually in the last several decades, efficiency, like an efficient public policy. Or another term now is effective, like what was your intention and was it effective as you intended? So this idea of having authentic policy, it goes beyond just the efficiency and the effectiveness. Efficiency is about making things as best as possible within the limited resources. Effective is making sure that the policy provides the outcome and output that you had intended. But I think authentic public policy is really trying to connect back to yourself of what's your real intention and what was your real drive for that kind of policy and what's the collective's intention as well and what's the real goal that we want to achieve, at the end of the day in a much longer term time span than what we would look at in like a year or, election cycles of 4 years. So to me, authenticity of the public policy goes back to examining and questioning the real drive that the decision maker has or the collective have.
That's really interesting because I think when we talk public policy, it's usually this very macro scale. Large data points, not very human in a sense. But when you say going back to the self, it's really taking almost the zooming in really to the only unit that exists, which is people. So how do you frame the self and how do you do that authentic exploration then?
So what I always encourage people do, and it's just like how you started this podcast, just come back to yourself and be present, be mindful. So that's the same that I'm trying to do with people who are at the table or who have the responsibility to make policy decisions. Really be aware of themselves first before they, get into that debate or discussion on any type of policy. And to have people have that ability to stay grounded or be grounded and lead and facilitate others to be grounded. And then make the decisions together, right? So I focus a lot on the space, like what we're doing now. Where are you physically seated? Are you comfortable, or is it hierarchical in a closed door meeting room with microphone, air conditioning, no sunlight, fixed tables.
Yeah.
So is that physical space as well as the space in your mind and in your heart, that start to question. Doing that is not easy, I think, because people are not accustomed to be authentic all the time, right? So there's sometimes it's performing, right? As a policymaker, especially. So that performance, how do you get the role play out?
Yeah. How do you do it?
I think it depends on in what context.
Yeah.
So, for example, in our work with the Thai military to discuss complex issues regarding our neighbor Myanmar and the effects of the conflict of Myanmar towards Thailand. So, we had people before the seminar stand up and look out onto this reservoir, into the piece of water, and then did the grounding, did the meditation, realize how, through the water, how Myanmar and Thailand is connected. The ripple effects one point of the pond will affect the whole pond. And we have that self agency to create our own, effects or ripples that we want our friends to feel, whether it's humanitarian aid, whether it's development projects, whether it's embracing the people of displaced people here on Thai soil, with open arms. So just to ensure that whatever we do is connected. So that's an example of, doing something quite, I think, different, to ask military officers to stand up and look out to the pond and start connecting with the water in an authentic way. Or we ask people to draw about a piece of toy from their childhood and share with everyone what that toy means to them as an introduction. So instead of just saying who we are, what our name is, then we go right back into that piece of toy. Or, some people did not have toys, so they drew other pieces of material that they never possessed. And so that's already a conversation starter about who they really are, what their pain might be, what they still long for. And so it humanizes all of us before we get into specific discussions about macro policies. Yeah. So we do a lot of those. We give flowers to each other before a session, like the gratitude.
Okay.
So just give flowers and say thank you. We also have tried with the forest bathing, so have people connect to trees before they connect socially to each other and then connect to the bigger world of the policies. So I think there are several tangible activities that people could be invited to do to bring their true selves and their whole selves to the table.
That's really beautiful how you're using nature as it exists to help people connect, and I want to go there. Maybe bringing it, like going further into this authenticity word, if you will, concept or a sense of being authentic. It's a tricky one because we all wear these roles and hats all the time. In many ways, since childhood, we've learned how to not be authentic most of the time.
Yeah.
How do you unpack authenticity as a concept for yourself? And then maybe how do you share this with people?
I always try to check 3 things that I think should be aligned, which is my thought, my feelings, and my actions. And if all 3 are aligned, then that is an indicator to me that I'm being authentic. So if I feel tired with a headache, and my thought is, I need to finish that work, I need to stay up, and then my action is I'm just going to procrastinate. So all three things seems to be clashing. So I need to choose. And normally, if I go with my emotions, that's probably the best way because the body is telling me that I need to rest, right? So, okay, I can stop. I'm not procrastinating. I'm actually resting, which is important.
Yeah.
I need to send out that one email just to say I need 3 more days to extend the deadline or something, for example. So if all 3 things align, that's a level of authenticity. And to observe that whole spectrum of feelings and emotions, I think that requires that practice, right? Of mindfulness, detecting oneself through your breath and just slowing down and pausing and going into the space where you're allowed to feel and detect those emotions. So I think that would be the beginning point for me.
Mm.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you. It's not easy, and also there's no right answer. Am I already being authentic? I don't know, but at least I feel aligned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I do know from experience though that when we build all these personas through our lives because we need to survive, our authentic selves are hidden.
Yeah.
So as we discover, oh, it doesn't have to be like that. Oh, I don't need to say that, or I don't need to be that, and then you kind of shed away all the personas
Yeah.
that you've built. Then that gets to something more real.
Mm.
Yeah, your core self. Yeah.
Yeah, I think back to forgetting his name now, but the author of The Myth of Normal.
Yeah, Mate Gabo.
Yes. And how he
Yeah.
talks about as babies, because of attachment and the
Yeah.
need for attachment, we learn to focus on that and not be authentic in the fear that it may lose that attachment that we
Yeah.
have. But then as we grow into adults, we need the authenticity and we need to give up that attachment. But that transition is where our society tends to make it difficult for us, so we tend to struggle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, attachment theory is such a wonderful theory that it can explain our choice of behavior and explain and actually guide us to know that this doesn't have to be the choice, right? Once we figure it out. Of course, the pattern is there and it's hard to do things differently, to rewire the way we think about the world. It's possible, yeah.
So, if I may ask, when did you start to make these acknowledgement or recognition of the need for authenticity in your life? When did that journey start for you?
Yeah, so I've been quite a go-getter, kind of like, okay, if you give me a ladder, I'll climb up. If you tell me I need to get an A, I'll get an A. If you tell me the end of education is PhD, I'll get a PhD. So I followed my life through by not focusing so much on how I truly feel, kind of just suppressing it so that I could just achieve, right? Or be who I thought I had to be. And then there was a moment of my life in my early 40s where I would say pain through relationships that had me think differently. But particularly, it was one session with a therapist,
Okay.
a psychotherapist, who I explained my problems, and then I had the solutions too, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, Ora, you explained everything to me so logically. Where are your emotions? You said, and I'm like, what? I told you all of that. I had a lot of emotions. She said, no, your real emotions. So she said, from now on, I allow you to have your real emotions and go express it. So from that day, that's when I started, oh shit, actually, I'm damn mad. Oh shit, actually, I'm damn, so it was like all this coming out, and I was able to then realize that the emotion. So from that day on, actually, then I started to read up and learn more, and then read up. See, that's the logic, the head in me.
Sure.
It's because that's how I've operated.
Sure.
Yeah, but then realize, oh, there's all these other parts.
Yeah.
It's not up here, right? And then connecting how I feel to my body and so on and so forth. So throughout, since mid-40s, so it's almost a decade now, I guess. Yeah, that of discovering and learning and realizing that maybe my way of knowing has been limited to just the logic.
I mean, you grew up in Thailand and then spent much of your adulthood, I think, around the world. In many ways, I guess in academia, it's a successful, professional and academic, excelling in these spaces.
Yeah.
You kind of have to succeed in the existing ways of knowing.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I guess and then seeing maybe the limitations of that.
Yeah, absolutely. In academia, because we are conditioned to the scientific knowledge and scientific inquiry and finding your answers in a scientific way, so that limits us to the observables and the provables and the rational through existing theories. Yeah, I think that played a lot into my behavior as well.
I mean, I think hearing you speak, what strikes me as really powerful is that you had this moment, sensitive, vulnerable moment, with your therapist. You had pain in relationships. You were able to see this transform, but then also, and this is particularly interesting, is then apply this into public policy. Like to see these changes that you see in your own life and then see them as not just separate from this work that you do, but extremely but there's a need to align it. What was that transition or process for you?
That's a great question because I think, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's felt this, which is in this process of discovering and awakening and transforming, if, in the beginning, it seems like you're in two different worlds. And that is also quite a struggle because then you don't realize which one is the authentic. Or you realize which one is authentic and which one isn't, and then it's a struggle, right? So I can kind of sympathize with people who wow, I want to go ordain as a monk, or I'm going to go live in a cave somewhere to be on my own, and I'm going to take myself out of the reality that I know. I can sympathize with that. However, for me, if I kept doing that, then I feel like I'm not fulfilling what I was built up to do, which is in academia and in public policy. And I'm very encouraged by great scholars like Mate Gabo and other scholars who have started to really shine our understanding of psychology and trauma and how all of that should be actually taken into consideration when we develop policies for people. Yeah. So without it, it's superficial. We don't truly understand people's behaviors under the iceberg. So that for me was kind of, okay, how do we? But it's not easy because then, all these new ways of thinking or acting and relating to problems, it's just not something that policy scientists have been trained to do.
Yeah. So maybe now taking us back to what you were talking about initially about you creating these workshops. What is it like then to start bringing up authenticity, things like the true self, things like emotions in this rigid, science-driven, if I can see it and measure it, only then it's real. What were some of the challenges that you've maybe faced? Or what do you see as maybe structurally the challenges that are still there as you try to do this?
Yeah, so we've ran a couple of workshops ranging from 1 hour to 3 days, and almost all of it has received really good feedback of, wow, we can actually be like that, we can actually come up with policies without the computer, the data, and the top-down hierarchical commands. So the challenge, I think, would be how do we get the system to accept this way of being and to embrace maybe more time for each topic that we're delving into, and also for the system to help connect the dots better, right? Like the dot between climate change and our everyday breathing to anything in between, from what we consume, how we produce, and so on and so forth, and our life's goals. It's hard because I think the capitalist system is the one that encompasses the world. And that capitalist system, the adjective that comes with it is efficiency, because efficiency is the core of making sure you work your capital so that it multiplies, or you yourself multiply your capital, and then to produce more and more. I used to, actually this topic of the word efficiency was part of my study in PhD in public administration as well. It's not something that scholars have not thought about, but we just haven't found a new adjective that people could relate to. Maybe being or something, but how do we, it's not just the adjective, it's a whole system, right, that encompasses us today.
So authentic public policy as the adjective that maybe this is the start of a whole new epic on public policy.
I hope it can be, right? And I think there's enough of us around the world that can relate, but how do we make it more mainstream? How do we make it that it's in our education system?
I'm gonna move my chair a bit.
Oh yeah,
The sun is.
the sunlight is hitting you.
You mentioned climate and
Yeah.
environment. Is that something that also then started to come deeper into your focus of seeing this global problem and challenge that we have, but maybe also seeing that the existing policy responses
Yeah.
were a deficit in very fundamental ways? Like how do you see this global climate change, narrative and the kind of policy responses?
Yeah, so because I'm trained in public administration, so I've always thought about the paradigms of public administration. And as mentioned, we know the traditional paradigm where you set up bureaucracies to solve problems through command and control, through law enforcement. And then there's the new public management paradigm where you trust the market and you have efficiency and you start having contracts, KPIs and all, and you hope like the government would be more efficient and less wasteful. And then the third paradigm is that new public governance where you work with like volunteers, you hope people will have good faith to work together to do collaboration. So I always thought all three were not enough because it didn't focus on the climate. It's just focused on whatever you want to do, do it either lawfully, efficiently, collaboratively.
Doesn't take into consideration like
What
the
you
actual
do. What
and
you
the
do.
inputs and the
Exactly,
impact, yeah.
exactly. So I'm pushing for what's called smart sustainable governance paradigm, which is whatever you do, it's for sustainability. It's not for accumulating your wealth. It's not for trying to develop blindly and measuring growth as GDP or how much capital or income your population has. But it's for sustainability. It's like you're looking at diversity, biodiversity, you're looking at the future generation, you're looking at definitely reducing the use of fossil fuel, carbon emission. And being smart in the smart sustainable means you're adopting technology that's appropriate as well. Like you're not, saying no to all technologies and start living in a cave. But you're questioning all the technologies and you're adopting technologies to help you achieve the sustainable goal. And in this paradigm, it's about justice as well. So the transition to becoming more sustainable, we need to, make sure that it's just as well. So with that, then I thought, okay, what adjective to drive it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's not lawful.
The adjective.
Adjective, right? So people can be like, because for me, those adjectives are like the key principles, right, to drive.
Yeah.
Because all policies needs to be evaluated and monitored, right? Policies should be evaluated and monitored and evaluated. And to monitor and evaluate, you always need to have criteria of against what, how do we know that it's successful? And it always comes back to the adjective. Yeah. So the adjective for this new paradigm that I wrote on this and I'm still promoting it is authenticity, is spirituality. Like spiritually led policy making, spiritual focus of the being and the decision making. So, So all of that is in this paradigm that I'm driving all these workshops and as an academic, right? So all these workshops and all come under this concept, right? Yeah. So that's how I'm trying to connect to climate.
I mean, this is so fascinating because it's typically such a difficult intersection to make when you're speaking about intangibles and the invisible to systems that are designed to only measure the tangible and people who are trained in that. You're doing that, and that's really incredible. What are the kind of spaces that you're doing this in? What's the kind of reaction? I mean, you mentioned the Thai military. How is the world around you responding? Like whether it's academia, whether it's government. I'm curious, as you are making these shifts, how are you seeing different pockets of the world respond to it? And where are you seeing the resistance? And where are you seeing maybe the willingness and the gravity that actually is coming towards you?
That's a great question. Because in the beginning, me and my colleagues here, we were like, okay, that's crazy if we introduce this to others. So I can give you an honest opinion that everybody craves for it, actually. Once you open it and allow it, people want more of it. Because it's their authentic self speaking, right? So with the military, the Thai border military, they actually have asked us to conduct more episodes of facilitation workshops on heavy issues. And they've asked my team to go in to train the new generation of military officers on grounding. How do you do grounding?
Like literally earthing and
Yeah,
grounding.
yeah.
Tell me more. This is something that's close to my heart.
Yeah, so they're opening up.
Yeah.
Because the highest position person saw for himself how powerful it could be to bring their real selves into the discussion.
Okay.
Right? So he experienced it. He drew the metaphor of himself. He practiced grounding in our workshop.
Yeah.
And it was proven through experience that it works. I see after this, then now we can discuss, illegal migrants in Thailand, and we don't have to be upset with anyone or anything. We can just be, right? So allow a person to be is very powerful, I think. And another agency we've worked very closely with is the Department of Climate Change. So the Department of Climate Change, full of wonderful people, have been focused on the engineer part. How do we lower carbon emissions? How do we get factories to comply? How do we get people, what kind of tax? So it's very technocratic solutions and engineering solutions. So the 3 days workshop that we had with them was going into a forest with wooden structures to stay. It's a resort, actually, but it was all inside the forest. And we did 3 steps. The inner connection, the nature connection, the social connection. And social connection includes the future generation connection. So we brought conversation from the future generation to today by writing that letter of your future self to yourself now. And then we designed policies together. So the policies that came out were something so radically different from what they would have done in their meeting rooms at the Department of Climate Change.
Yeah.
For example, the idea of Soul City.
Soul City?
Yeah,
Okay.
SOUL. So it's the city that nourishes the soul and the city that focuses on renewable energy, physical energy like solar, water, but also renewable energy within ourselves. How do we invigorate our own energies from the inside so that we're vibrant people in a vibrant city? All this conversation and design thinking of policies, I don't think it would come out so easily if we were just seated in a air-conditioned room or did polling or surveying people. Yeah, it's a lot of imagination and creativity that goes in. So the people of the Department of Climate Change, they were so impressed. At first, they were skeptical.
Yeah.
And we had the post experiment survey. And people were skeptical. It's like, what? Yoga in the morning? What meditation? What forest bath? And there was a...
Which forest were you go to?
We were, oh gosh, I wish I could tell. It's Labiang Pasak. It's Ora-orn area.
Okay.
It's Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a stream, but the stream became like a pond where people could take a dip. And it was cold water. So it was replicating your ice baths, right? That many of us sometimes do.
To train today,
Yeah, to train today. But the ice cold water coming out and just waking up, right, from the inside. And did the nature bath, talked to the trees, and we did one beautiful session seated on the ground, surrounded by trees just like this in the forest, and then conversations just flowed. And we had 2 large trees just like this as the gateway.
Wow.
Yeah, and then that was the first time that actually my co-facilitator, she's from the Department of Forestry. She said this is an example of co-creating with nature. So just trusting nature that it's here and it's helping us.
Yeah.
And the conversation, they're having the conversation with us too, actually. So from all of that experience, again, the next day, a lot of great policy ideas came out, including when we pay tax in Thailand, right now you can tick if you want to donate to political parties. So the one suggestion, and I like this one, very concrete. Would you like to donate to a national park or to a particular tree that's
like a commons,
a
right?
common, So you choose where your tax goes, and then the idea of having those trees write a letter back to say thank you for your taxes for me this year, so I can become stronger or something. So there's a connection between what you're making in terms of monetary rewards and where you're putting your money back into where you want. So these ideas, again, can only come out once we're connected to ourselves, to nature, and see the creativity that arises. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, I think I'm not going to look at Thai government news the same way again anymore. I think knowing now, like the kinds of maybe experiences that are happening behind the scenes, maybe next time there's some headlines that I don't expect, I will now understand where it may came from. But in fact, hearing you speak makes me recognize like the role of this hospicing that you were playing, where I mean the military is one of the hardest institutions to deal with, pretty on anywhere on the planet probably.
Yeah.
A lot of all kinds of numbing and trauma, and let alone like
True.
different kinds of education. Let's
Yeah.
call it that for now.
Yeah.
That these people go through.
Yeah.
Yet they are vital cogs in our present systems, and especially in Thailand when they play a major role. And so this actually reminds me of a systems change framework called the two loops, which previous guest Jordan, who I think you also know,
Yeah.
Jordan Shannon, introduced, which is this idea that when the existing systems are declining and failing, there's two kinds of actors. There are those who are creating new spaces. So as people who are fleeing from the existing system, they have spaces to go to. And to be honest, that's where I feel Light Forest occupies or would like to occupy, which is creating new spaces where we can think and imagine and create something really new. But the existing system is still there and alive, and we all still need to rely on it.
Yeah.
And hospicing and playing and dealing with that mainstream system is also really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes in the world that I also interact with, it's easy to just reject the old system and saying it's broken. I've talked about the design of the institutions themselves, which are extractive and violence and fear-based.
Yeah.
And feeling that they can't be fixed. It's going to go to something new.
Yeah.
But in your experience, you're working with these people, and that's maybe not the case. Like there's a lot of room and space for that.
There is hope. However, I guess as we mentioned, right, when our authentic selves are so covered up, right, there's still quite a number of people who are unwilling to go there because they are comfortable with the fear base, with the top-down control, command. I mean, I think military is an interesting institution. From working with them, and then I realized, and I agree, and they said this to me, they said, we're the only profession that can be told to go die, and they cannot say no. They cannot say no. That's how we've trained them to be, how they've trained themselves to be, and how they feel they are different from others. And that's why we praise the veterans, all kind people who go to war, or, heroes. But it's a story we've created, right?
Yeah.
It's a story we've created, and maybe no one needs to die. No one needs to be told to go die, right?
Yeah.
But that's the second loop in the system that we probably need to. But then when I have this conversation with the military, they would say, Ajahn, you're just too idealistic. The world isn't like that. And then I'm told all these stories of, that person's been killed, this person, they're not going to have mercy on us.
I mean, just our neighboring Myanmar and the situation there.
Yeah.
Very different military.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate, but it reinforces, right? It's like, see what happened over there. See what, they're doing.
Yeah.
We need to protect ourselves. Yeah. But a form of protection that doesn't need to be aggressive. I was just discussing this with my husband this morning. It's the fear of mortality. Yeah. And so that's why we ourselves are also partly okay with having a military. We ourselves, deep down, maybe.
I mean, I think we all have this survival instinct that's built in, but then there's also the story of many stories that we attach to this life. And perhaps the Buddhists, they talk about very clearly, about, impermanence and seeing, and there's so many meditative practices on death itself as being powerful and transformative.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether, being in Thailand, I wonder, given we are sitting in a Buddhist context, especially for maybe listeners who aren't so familiar with Thailand, how does the Buddhist interplay, do you think that foundation in Thailand allows you to create the space that's maybe different from other countries?
Yeah, I think being a Buddhist country, Thailand, has allowed me to experiment this. And also me being born as a Buddhist has allowed me to grasp this concept in a way that may be harder for those who are not from this context. Yeah, the impermanence, the cyclical nature of time, and not the linear, no doomsday, right? Because it's cyclical, so there's no that last day of anything. Yeah, I think it pretty much plays into this understanding of being and this the sense of agency. Yeah, your own karma, all of that plays a role into how I interpret. And I think Thailand has a lot of potential to experiment further and to even be kind of the hub for, soul cities.
Yeah, there's this mindfulness city from Bhutan.
Oh yeah, that was very similar. So the Bhutan city is very similar to the idea. And I heard, and I have to verify this information, but the architects helping the Bhutanese are from Thailand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because of the deep connection of the architects working together.
Well, I've heard there's also a Singaporean, a heavy Singaporean,
Oh yeah, but I'm not sure if they're part of that too.
I'm interested to see how that Singaporean efficiency plays out into a mindfulness city.
I think that's a whole complex story of Bhutan as well. Yeah, I think these cravings are finding their way because people do need something else to anchor. Yeah. Right, with the climate catastrophes, with right now, like the trade war, and all this uncertainties going on.
I mean, things are changing. Take it to climate, because you're working, I think, quite closely now on climate issues here in Chiang Mai. In many ways, I mean, everything is interrelated and interconnected, but the climate issue particularly seems one that is just captures everything. Yeah. Like all the excesses, all the inauthenticity, sort of all coming together to now contribute to this ecological collapse. Yeah. How are you seeing we bring this authenticity space into the climate action movement? How do you see because globally, everyone talks about sustainability, and I know it's a word and it can be defined in different ways, but where I find resistance towards sustainability is like, what are we trying to sustain? The way I see it is the existing systems themselves are the source or the root of a lot of issues, and so sustaining isn't what we should be aiming for. And regeneration, and that's why I put regeneration at the heart of the Light Forest mission as well, is we really need to regenerate authentically from inauthenticity to authenticity. But so globally we have this climate movement. How are you seeing it, like in terms of how it's playing out globally, and where do you see maybe the spaces? And you're already doing this. You mentioned about having people connect to their authentic selves as they create policy. But how are you seeing the climate movement and discourse space?
Yeah, I think we need to, like what you said, I think we need to kind of frame it in a way that makes better sense. For me, the world will move on, right? The nature will move on. It's adapting to the rise of the temperature rise. There are certain species that we extinct, but there are certain species coming back, and the plants are moving, right? New plants are emerging where it was never grown. And so I see the world as evolving, adapting to the changes. And then it's the humans that needs to adapt eventually, of course. And we're all adapting, but it's that transition of adaptation that's painful, I think. But then again, people could say we've been adapting all of human lives, continue adapting. But this adaptation now, I think, if we could do it in such a way that it's not causing even more pain to oneself and to society, that's where authenticity comes in, right? Yeah. Of what you actually need, why you're here, what fulfills you every day, what's your purpose in life. And then, how can we take all of that into the broader systems that we've created for the masses, i.e. the policies that we design? Yeah. How do you translate that? I think it's hard because a lot of us, of course, have been conditioned.
Yeah, and education has a big role to play.
Education has a huge role to play. Yeah. The books we read, the philosophers everybody just reads Mate Gebel's book, right? The Myth of Normal, from 6th grade or something. You might not understand everything in 6th grade, but 7th grade, 8th grade, you continue reading it and something like that, right? Yeah. I think it's needed.
Yeah. and maybe sharing some insight from sitting in Chiang Mai and where we feel the effects of climate quite visibly.
Yeah.
The PM 2.5 issue happens now annually for over a decade.
Yeah.
How are people seeing this? How are government authorities seeing this problem? And do you think how do we start to make shifts? And I wouldn't say it's just a government policy thing. How do we as people, how do the indigenous tribes living in the mountains,
Yeah.
how do we start to make shifts to I wouldn't say make it all go away, but to accept it and start to shift?
Yeah. So the biggest, I think even harder than the working with the military and the illegal migrants, the conflict in Myanmar, the PM 2.5 issue right now, as of now, has not delved into the spiritual realms so much yet. Because a lot of the discussion is still in that closed door aircon room, and a lot is focused on putting out the fire and arresting those who light the fire. So it's a pretty much the traditional paradigm of control, command, enforcing the law. Whereas you experience the Nature Wisdom Council, that kind of bringing in fire to the discussion, rocks and soil and trees, and let's have a real conversation on what fire is saying.
Yeah, can you share a little bit about the nature?
So that's one big, I think, tangible activity that we could replicate and expand. So we have a better understanding of, number one, how we cannot control nature and how nature plays the role to guide us even, right? So what it is, it's having people feel grounded and having people have that experience to embody the nature in themselves, which we're made of fire, wind, liquid, and soil. But we don't, because when we die, we're going to become soil, and along the way, some energies come. So we're part of that, but we don't realize it. We don't acknowledge it, right? If we could bring all that and feel that connection with everything else on this planet, all the elements, then maybe we'll have a different imagination towards fire, towards PM 2.5. So that's where I'm at right now, of trying to push for the spiritual approach into this problem. But just to tell you some advancement in this Nature Wisdom Council, I'm having some conversations with people in other parts of the world who are very interested, like Jordan, Shannon as well, and see if we could push this to the UN level of having some kind of Nature Wisdom Council globally. Yeah. So that's exciting for me.
I mean, it's sort of capturing, historically, our communities have always had wisdom holders who play roles in guiding us. And maybe it feels like that's what we're sort of missing these days. We're missing some true custodians of wisdom and spiritual guidance, if you will, to guide us. And I like the name of the Wisdom Council.
Nature Wisdom Council.
And bring the wisdom, allowing nature to bring her wisdom.
Right. Can you imagine like General Assembly, right? Like the UN General Assembly. But instead of nation states, it's like all the elements on this in this universe to come in, and we speak in human words to translate everything. But it's allowing, not allowing, it's accepting actually that we're part of the bigger, broader universe.
That's lovely.
But coming back to the PM2, just very shortly, I think what we need to do is, number one, understand the complexities of the issue and how it relates to the development of Thailand, especially in the northern area, and the connection to the single agricultural, monocultural produce. That's related, of course, to earnings and to efficiency, right? And definitely not blame Highlanders or ethnic groups, because many of them have actually lived in harmony with fire and forest, many of them. But as we, the intrusion of the system that we're in now is, of course, perpetuating this. I would say irresponsible use of fire. That's what's happening right now. Irresponsible use of fire for efficiency, but it's not everybody. Some people use very, very efficiently the fires, and it's needed.
I spent a week in January at the Hinlat Nai village, a little bit north of Chiang Rai, with the Pakanyo indigenous tribe, and they showed us the ways that they practice rotational farming.
Oh yeah.
And of course, they do use fire.
For rotational
But as you
farming.
said, responsible use. They create fire circuit breakers, and they're just very, very aware and conscious of the destructive potential and the implications it may have. And from what I hear from what they shared with us is that after many decades of painful struggles with the Thai establishment, that's actually changing now. And they're being recognized more and more for the wisdom that they're bringing and the role that they're playing.
Yeah, I think rotation, but they're very small proportion of the forest and agricultural burning. Yeah, the rotational practices.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, the term is tragedy of the commons, right? Yeah, where it's just a comparison is like you're in a closed room and everybody gets to smoke one cigarette. But then there's just more people coming into the room to smoke that one cigarette, and everyone's saying, I'm only smoking one cigarette. But then the whole, right, it's a carrying capacity of our planet. And, So, and then it's like, okay, everybody's only one cigarette, but whose cigarette do we say no to, right? Who's going to make that sacrifice?
And this is a classic also, developed nations versus developing countries.
Yeah.
But what I hear is that we're still fighting the efficiency paradigm, then the countries or areas that feel that they haven't smoked enough feel that they should continue the right to smoke.
True.
Because they're not dying yet.
True.
At least they haven't recognized that.
True. The harm. Yeah. And I'm literally comparing to the use of fire in this sense in the northern of just northern of Thailand, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna burn. Oh, I need fire as well. And it's like, okay. So right now, for academic purposes and for knowledge creation, what I'm doing with my team and the stakeholders in Chiang Mai is to identify the prescribed burning fires. What fire is actually truly needed, for livelihood and for sustainability of the forest. To categorize fire. This is where we're planning to do Nature Wisdom Council and bring only in fire. But fire of different types, like your little fire here, your agricultural fire, like whatever. It's like, and then we're gonna do kind of consensus as for now of which fires we will.
Do you think you mentioned northern Thailand, but the problem is often framed as a regional one where you have Myanmar. And how do you? Again, it's a nation, state, national border, arbitrary line drawn across, geographic features. Is that something that you're able to disentangle?
Yeah, I think the stakeholders here in Chiang Mai, of course, is with the sense of what we can manage, what we can control, and the areas that we feel helpless. But then we need to move into that area of doing our best in our home and sharing across as best as we can, and identify that it's the Thais who also invest in that side. It's all related.
Well, as a Chiang Mai resident, I am hoping that I wouldn't say the PM 2.5 issue goes away overnight. It likely won't, but that maybe we've seen the worst of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to say it. Because the historically, we know that there's been some sort of haze in this city dating back hundreds of years, but the level of it should be less than the level that goes above, I think, 37.5.
Yeah, that's very ambitious. At least knowing what our world is today.
Yeah, that's true. Should be the days that goes above the accepted criteria should be less than 50. Should be less than 50 days.
Okay.
That's the idea, on average the whole year.
Well, and around this trailer on PM 2.5, as acknowledged, we're reaching also close to the end. So bringing it all back to authenticity and your own journeys as you've experienced, I think there's a lot of people out there who are also starting to awaken to this challenge or this need for more authenticity. There's a lot of people also in academia or working within these spaces who see the the systems and ability to bring the kind of change that's needed. What kind of advice would you give to young people, senior people, whoever? What kind of, how do you advise people like me and others on how we can navigate and be authentic through this shift?
Well, I don't dare give you advice, just sharing. I think what you're doing is great. The Light Forest, just carving out that space to be yourself and at the same time share. And hopefully others will learn from or take ideas from and then expand, right? I think it takes courage to be ourselves and to be not stuck in the system that we think we have to be in. So I guess number one, slow down, breathe, take in your surrounding, everything, and take it easy. Again, efficiency is, you got to be productive all the time. That kind of...
It's in our bodies.
It's in our bodies, right? It's not that bad, but if you take it to the extreme, it's really bad, right? It's find that middle ground of, the flow, try to find that level of productivity that invigorates and not, drains, right? Yeah. So slow down, find the space, find the courage, talk to people, and I think, concretely, I think everybody should understand about trauma, be trauma informed in your life, so you understand yourself and others better, and start working to peel off, towards your authentic self until you die. I don't think anyone truly gets there, but by trying, I think we'll feel lighter. Yeah, lighter.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
Yeah. And certainly you found joy in bringing your personal changes into the work that you do and seeing that this alignment is really important.
Yes, yes, I think so. Having one life rather than several lives. I think that's important. Otherwise, it's too tiring.
Nice. Well, I think everything you shared really speaks and resonates with I think this journey, and especially hearing how you've brought this authenticity space into typically air-conditioned, rigid, stuffy academic spaces. Because it feels like academia is like the last place to evolve. Like private sector evolves in different ways, but the market forces it to evolve sometimes. Government perhaps evolves with electorate or sometimes force and violence. But it feels like academia sometimes is just stuck in the old ways of knowing.
Yeah, true.
But perhaps there'll be new forms of academia that will evolve.
Something that really embraces all ways of knowing. So it's a constant struggle, right, between the scientific rationality versus the more experiential, the acceptance of knowing without being able to proving. So this experiential learning, I think it's becoming more and more. I see the spaces of this and people talk about it, like deep ecology movement, and again, the trauma movement, and just the whole spiritual movement actually cannot be studied, has to be experienced. But the more we experience, the better we are able to articulate it out in words and then write out rationally, perhaps. So I think it's seeing more.
This circular, and this is something that I'm also trying to experiment, with things here in Chiang Mai and other programs as well, is we have knowledge, as you say, you read the books, and it maybe even a book on meditation, if you will, and it takes you to the gate. But then you've got to have that experience. But then I feel like you can have that experience, but there's benefit in translating it as well into written word or into... and then that can be shared. And that cyclical journey, which is what you're doing.
What I'm trying to do with the smart sustainable governance, I guess, to elevate the experience to abstract reasoning, to conceptualize it, so it stays in the realm of academia.
Well, I think on behalf of many people, I'll express gratitude.
Thank you.
Helping hospice, everyone from the Thai military to academics,
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that we had this beautiful spot to have this conversation. The sun has moved as it does. Well, it doesn't, but we move.
It's a signal for us to end our conversation.
It is getting a bit warm.
Yeah.
And the day has properly started. But I'm grateful that we got to have this conversation at the start.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think there's a lot that you've shared. There's a lot for me to process and digest. And I'm hopeful that we will maybe have some shared nature wisdom councils in the future.
Yeah, let's do that.
And bring the light forest experience from just a auditory, intellectual journey, which is where this podcast is now, into something more experiential, where we can start to feel in the connection we have to the trees and the forest, and allow them to guide us.
That'd be great. And Light Forest is a great space for all these experiments, I think.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Ah,
and we'll see you around in the forest.